previous one. Our next topic is delivering smart, sustainable growth. And I know that's only 4 little words, but actually when you think about it, delivering, pretty important, smart, the new way of doing it, sustainable, the environmental challenge, and growth, well, we're all growing and we need to match that. We're going to be looking at how the consulting engineering sector can influence the economy and the construction industry's urgent need for a digital and sustainable transition. So joining me for this panel are John Fitzgerald, one of Ireland's top economists, Pat Barry, CEO of the Irish Green Building Council, Angus O'Keefe of ROD, Chris Behan of Arup, and Anne Graham, CEO of the National Transport Authority. As we did with our previous panel, each is going to speak for around 3 minutes on their area of particular interest, after which we'll open things up for a broader discussion. So, my first speaker, John Fitzgerald, I've interviewed him I don't know how many times. He's worked with the Department of Finance, going from there to the ACEI, where he published extensively on macroeconomics, energy economics, and environmental economics. He was chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Council between 2016 and 2021 and remains an ordinary member of that council. And he's currently an adjunct professor in the Department of Economics at TCD and in the School of Electrical and Electronic Engineering in UCD. He's going to give us an overview of the interaction between climate change and the economy. John.
Bang goes my 3 minutes. I've spent over 30 years working on the economics of climate change, and it's clear that we are going to have to spend between 2 and 3% of our income over the next decade on taking action. But the problem isn't so much the money. There are other problems and obstacles. First of all, much of what we've got to do to tackle climate change involves investing in retrofitting houses, investing in the metro, investing in electricity grids, windmills and so on. So it's about construction. We are in a fully employed economy today. And it really upsets me when I hear people saying, oh, greening the Irish economy will create jobs. The problem is we don't want jobs. They are jobs that are going to come from somewhere else. Are we going to reallocate people from the IT sector to doing the work or from manufacturing? Where are they going to come from? So the constraint, the first constraint is we need people with the relevant skills. And that is a bigger constraint than the money. Secondly, because we are fully employed, we need to be more productive. And the earlier sessions have discussed innovation and how we can do building construction better. For me, probably the single biggest obstacle to tackling climate change is the planning system. And Ronnie, you talked about it, and everybody has talked about it since. When I hear the new planning bill has 800 pages in it, it scares the wits out of me. There must be mouse holes in there that lawyers are going to get through, and it is going to hold things up forever. So that is a real problem. It's affecting forestry, it's affecting all areas of infrastructure to tackle climate change. In terms of skills, it's interesting, Ronnie, you highlighted the fact that this room is predominantly male. Actually, I've worked with many engineers. They tend to be in the public sector, and more of the women tend to be there. But it is undoubtedly an issue in this profession. Although 50% of Irish doctors are now women, 55% of Irish lawyers are women. So the professions are democratizing, you're seeing balance. But it is true that in the building construction sector, the proportion of women is tiny. So if you're short of people and skills, it is training people as plumbers, carpenters. That is a resource where they are already living here, so we don't have to house them. So making better use of our resources. You are focusing in terms of justice, in terms of treating people equally, but actually, if you're looking at this commercially, the answer is more women. Also, in terms of Ireland, what makes us unusual is that 25% of our kids go abroad, they emigrate, but they're homing pigeons and they come back. And 15% of the Irish workforce have worked abroad and come back. And research shows they are 10% more productive because they learned how to do things differently. In addition, we have recruited a huge number of people from abroad. And immigration, people tend to think of asylum seekers. Immigration in Ireland are people with third-level qualifications working in the room next to you or sleeping in the bed beside you. In that 15% of children born in Ireland in the last 20 years have one parent who's Irish, one who's not Irish. So that this is keeping the economy going. The construction sector actually has relatively few immigrants or returned immigrants. The professional services sector, which includes engineers, has a very significant proportion of returned immigrants. And the health sector, 15% of the health sector are returned immigrants and 35% are from abroad. So yes, we can recruit from abroad, but making better use of our own resources means you don't have to house people coming to Ireland. Finally, innovation, and I'm interested, I think you're going to talk about this. We've already heard about digital skills and making it more efficient. Also in terms of materials, a thing I'm really concerned about is cement is 6% of world's emissions comes from cement. Replacing cement with timber is the way to go. But the obstacles, and I just had a very fascinating discussion with somebody before this started about the problems of building a timber building in Ireland. Everybody knows in much of the rest of the world they're safe if you do it properly. Here, the fire officers are unhappy. So changing the system so that we can innovate and do it fast is vital if we are going to tackle climate change. Thank you.
Well, John, thank you very much for that scene setter. Funnily, you mentioned the timber. In 1996, when I was a journalist, I went to Japan and filmed that Century Homes were building timber-framed homes and shipping them out to Japan because after the Kobe earthquake, the only buildings still standing were the timber-framed ones. It was an extraordinary story. Anyway, our next speaker is Pat Barry of the Irish Green Building Council, an experienced architect. Pat was elected chair of the World Green Building Council's European Regional Network, a crucial role on the path to net zero. He was involved in the development of a national environmental product declaration programme for construction products and a national certification system for sustainable new housing. He's going to speak to us about the latest approaches to more sustainable green building. Pat.
Good afternoon. Well, I suppose we've two twin challenges. We have to legally cut our carbon emissions by 2030 by 51%, whilst at the same time deliver greatly increased housing output. Your great speaker earlier, Ronnie, showed our roadmap on one of our slides, Building a Zero Carbon Ireland, where we actually quantified the National Development Plan. And that showed that if, in business as usual, we build out the entire National Development Plan and all the housing we need, we blow our carbon budget. So we have to find a way, as Jerry Grant said earlier, we have to prioritise what we build. And that means actually looking at the projects, are they going to deliver the economic, environmental and social benefits? And then we have to look at, how can we, so for example, in 2022, the average size of home we delivered was 124 square meters, which is a 4-bedroom home, when actually what we need are smaller units to house the average size of household, which is 2.74, which is, 2-3-bedroom homes. So currently, our climate emissions are something the same as for the built environment, are somewhere around 37% of our emissions, made up of 14% from the construction activities. So in order to increase construction, we have to become far more efficient. And that means developing new ways of constructing, but it also means different typologies. It means developing more within our existing towns and villages. It takes 30% less infrastructure and carbon to build on a brownfield site than it does on a greenfield site. So we have to change the type of development we do. We need to build more mixed-use development. We have to stop this building tranches of 3-bedroom semis because they lack diversity. They also lack the amenities that enabled people to walk and cycle and get rid of, we need to get people out of cars, make better use of space within our within our communities. And again, coming on to one of the great benefits of timber construction and mass timber construction is not so much that you're going to build 22-story tall buildings, but the fact that you can actually intensify density within cities. It means rather than demolishing something like Citibank down along the quays, you could actually put 4, 5, 6 stories of mass timber construction on top of it and densify that way without removing that property. So I suppose we've set out within our zero carbon roadmap a roadmap for consulting engineers. If you go to that, and that's been endorsed by the Association of Consulting Engineers of Ireland, there is a roadmap there for you to see how you can help work within carbon budgets and design buildings that stay within those budgets.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Our third speaker is Angus O'Keefe. Angus is a director with ROD, a company involved in planning, designing and managing major infrastructure projects. He's worked with both public and private sector clients in Ireland, the UK and Europe, and he's a specialist in building information modelling and represents the National Standards Authority of Ireland at European level. He's going to be looking at the management of data. We've already heard today that data is an increasingly important element of construction, and he's going to be expanding on that in relation to the design, construction and operation of assets. Angus.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Good morning, all. It's incumbent on us as consulting engineers to support society in the optimal use of the built environment and the optimal delivery of new built environment. Anne-Marie mentioned earlier on the green and digital transition, and they come hand in hand. We can't achieve more sustainable outcomes with our built environment if we don't know enough about it, if we don't understand if we don't have the data about it. We need to extend the life of assets, and there's a lot of talk today about construction and projects, but a lot of our members are also working on extending the life of existing assets, on optimizing the use of existing assets, and we need to be able to have the information at hand to enable us to support our clients to do that. Throughout the life of existing assets, endless decisions are made, and we can't make decisions without data, without information. And we, unfortunately, are surrounded by a very difficult problem, a wicked problem, I would say, in that information management in the built environment is very challenging. There are so many interdependencies that it's seemingly impossible to solve the problem, but we have to chip away at that problem. And we can chip away at it through a more systematic approach and through structured data. The ACEI supports the OGP's BIM mandate, not the OGP's one, but the one that OGP have brought to us through the Capital Works Management Framework. We are supportive of it. I say that as the chair, the convener of the ACEI BIM committee. We support what PJ was mentioning earlier on as the Build Digital project. Our committee members are engaged in that project and supporting it from within. We don't want to throw grenades from without. We want to be within and support it that way. But we do believe that neither Build Digital project nor the OGP BIM mandate are going far enough. They need more investment from government, and they need to be more ambitious in their targets. We need major public asset owners and the government departments to whom they report to be more ambitious, to provide central support to project managers, to asset managers in how government and the major asset owners require information to be managed throughout the asset life cycle. And that's not just about projects, it's about the assets in service. We look at DART, we've got DART programme, Bus Connects, Dublin and Metrolink, all hopefully subject to planning coming through to construction quite soon. There are massive projects there bringing in supply chains from Ireland, large suppliers from Ireland and around Europe and further afield, who have capabilities in information management, proven capabilities who've learned from major projects internationally, and we should be bringing the lessons from those organisations back to central government, back to the OGP and the Build Digital project, and then feeding that out through to the smaller projects. And finally, this is a much too complex problem to rely on humans alone to solve. We need to use computers to solve this problem, and to do that we need machine-readable data. A lot of focus at the moment on BIM and information management is on how to share PDFs through web services and what to name the PDF. It's all a little bit 2002. It needs to be much more about the individual pieces of data, how you structure it and format it in a way so that it can be automatically validated by computers, because the problem is so complex that we can't rely wholly on humans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I have to confess that at the end there, I had this little voice in my head, ring tech support, Ingrid, ring tech support. And just so you know, when you retire, you lose tech support. It's a really, really bad thing. So we're now going to hear from Chris Behan. Chris is a chartered engineer and associate at Arup, specialising in data centre projects. In his role as multidisciplinary design manager and mechanical team lead, he's responsible for managing large teams. He champions sustainability, particularly in relation to water, energy, and carbon. He has a particular interest in digitisation. He's also the 2024 recipient of the ACEI Future Leader Award, recognising a consultant engineer as a potential leader with excellent communication skills, business acumen, technical capabilities, and strong ethical values. And he's now going to display them to you.
No pressure. Yeah.
No pressure.
Thanks, Ingrid, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So just my background is in designing data centers, and this is ranging from small scale to large scale, but more recent experiences around hyperscale data centers, which are campus-wide facilities. Through my career today, I've seen a rapid transformation in terms of how we are building data centers to meet the ever-evolving needs of society. I wanted to make two key points around the industry that I work in. The first is the relationship between data and people and society. So it's very likely, probably a definite, that everyone in this room has used data centers many times today already, whether it's reading the news, checking the weather to see if you need to wear a jacket, checking the itinerary to see when your favorite speaker is speaking today, or checking that there's a Dublin bike ready for you at the dock near your house. So we use data every day, every hour of our lives, and this is why we see it as a piece of infrastructure. So it's essentially digital infrastructure, similar to the way that we use roads and public transport. And similar to those other infrastructure projects, there are challenges around delivering these and making them as efficient as possible with the least impact on our environment. So the digitization that we're talking about in terms of digital tools, it's so reliant on data centers. And the second point I wanted to make, now that I've kind of contextualized the role of data centers, is the ability that we have to make them more efficient. And there is a need. We all know there's a real need to make them as efficient as possible. I think in terms of data usage, we know that it's only going one way. So whether that's personal or professional life, we use data more and more. And Angus has set me up well for my point around the need to use data in better ways. And that might be through more intelligent tools. And this is driving data use up all the time. Luckily, over the last 10 years, as our data usage has exploded. The energy usage around data centers globally hasn't exploded. And that's through the role of engineers in making this essential infrastructure as efficient as possible. So I suppose part of my role now, and what I'm excited about as somebody that's very interested in sustainability, is how can I actually make the next step and continue to make this infrastructure as efficient as possible through measures in water, energy, nature, and carbon. That kind of sets the scene for what I think my role is in the sustainable growth in our sector.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And now we're going to move on to our final speaker, Anne Graham. Anne is involved in one of the most important areas of public infrastructure, transport. She joined the National Transport Authority as Director of Public Transport Services, rising to her current position of Chief Executive Officer. She qualified as a civil engineer at UCD, going on to secure a diploma in environmental engineering from Trinity, a master's in transport engineering from UCD, and an MBA in local government from DCU. I am now thoroughly intimidated. In her current role, she's responsible for overseeing the development of public transport. Anne is going to focus on the challenge of delivering smart, sustainable growth in transport.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Ingrid. So I suppose the role of the National Transport Authority, I mean, we're not the most important agency. I think many of our agencies are also, because we rely on people delivering housing and water, all other aspects, and energy, for us to be able to deliver what we are set out to deliver. But our key delivery is around sustainable transport. That's what we have been set up to do, more and better sustainable infrastructure. So we've been partnering with consulting engineers right from our initiation in 2009, and we wouldn't have got to the position that we are today without the support of the profession of your agencies, your organisations, to get us to through both delivering transport strategies across our cities, into now planning and getting through the planning for Bus Connects Dublin, the DART Plus programme, Metrolink, and then all the number of active travel projects that are being delivered by local authorities right around the country. So that partnership now continues and will continue as we move into delivery of these very important projects. So in terms of acting as client partner, or else continuing with the design and delivery of this infrastructure. So we rely on your expertise. We rely on you partnering with us to deliver these projects. And we rely on your ability to be able to find that expertise, not just in Ireland, but in other countries, as you are international companies that are represented here today. So we need then to deliver our sustainable transport sustainably. So when we move into delivery of the infrastructure, how can we reduce particularly the carbon input in terms of delivering new road projects, reusing our road infrastructure, and reusing that to give the best and most sustainable transport possible. So as other speakers have said, and particularly John has said, we need to deliver faster, we need to deliver more efficiently. And I suppose one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about is what we have had to go through in terms of Bus Connects Dublin, which is a very significant project. It's really about reusing the existing road space. So that is a sustainable project in its own. But we had multiple layers of consultation and then going through the planning system really effectively to allow us to take a bit more space out of private gardens. But really, some of that could have been delivered by taking more of the road space from cars. So I think we just need to possibly rethink, do we have to go through the very extensive planning in order to deliver what would be the same outcome by changing a lighting system or changing reuse of the space, and just deliver it a lot more quickly and effectively. And I think we have to question as well, in terms of delivery of road infrastructure in particular, are we going to be in a position to make a business case, particularly from a climate perspective, in terms of new motorway infrastructure, without really considering what is the sustainable means of delivering that kind of infrastructure. I think when we were developing our strategies, we always kind of felt that, I suppose, we would never be a full economy with full employment. I think we always thought that employment the tap would never, would always kind of flow, particularly in terms of the mechanics, drivers, all those skills that we need to actually deliver services on the ground. And now when we have a constraint there, again, we need to think more efficiently about how can we deliver the service level and the quality of services without relying on people. And that's probably considering moving another step up in terms of our delivery, in terms of being more efficient in the vehicles that are on the road, the number of people they can travel, rather than relying on bus. So maybe taking another step and looking at a longer articulated bus in order to deliver. So they're the kind of things that I think we need to consider now as we try and deal with the constraints that are now in the economy. And also to consider how we can deliver those, the decarbonisation of the fleet. We're going to certainly need to rely on the expertise of the consulting engineers to move decarbonisation a lot quicker, look at the energy production and the energy use in our fleets as well. So that was just the focus I wanted to start off with. Thanks.
That's great, Anne. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to start with John. One of the words that's coming out of this discussion for me is tension. Tension between the infrastructure need and the ability to deliver. For example, how are we going to multiply the number of houses that are needed if we are trying to be green as well? I mean, if you had one thing you could suggest, an immediate priority that would square that circle, what would it be?
Planning.
It's always planning.
Yeah, but there is a tension that the number of houses we need to retrofit every year, the resources in terms of people to do that are equivalent to building almost 10,000 houses. So when you're short of houses, if we are going to deliver on retrofitting, we're going to have to build less houses and more retrofits. So there is a tension that you...
And potentially a societal fallout.
Yeah, you have to make, society has to make its choice. If you could go to IKEA and buy everything flat pack and assemble it in the morning, we wouldn't have a problem. The problem is we have to construct it here.
If I can come to you, Chris, talking about data centres are one, maybe epitomise that tension as well, in terms of, you know, we're building them, we're marketing ourselves as a location for them, and yet we're hearing that the grid could collapse because they suck so much energy out. And I see John nodding there. How do we resolve that? I mean, why are we building these if we know that they could cripple the grid?
Yeah, it's a very important point, and it's a polarised point. There is a huge challenge here. We know that the grid is at capacity, and we know that there is essentially a moratorium on connections to the grid for essential data centres at the moment. I think that makes sense that that's in place. And, you know, as an industry, we look wider than Ireland, so we look at the European standpoint. And I think we do need to look more broadly at that in terms of only locating things in areas where there are resource issues in those locations where they are required. So a data center doesn't always have to be local to the area that it's serving. So in a lot of cases, we can locate data centers in a remote region.
But are we building them without the key resource they need, which is sufficient electricity? And hoping on a wing and a prayer that we'll get it sorted.
No, so essentially we've paused on constructing data centers locally unless they're self-sufficient, so they're no longer connecting to the grid. So over the next 5 to 7 years, as the electricity grid increases in capacity, we'll start to see them coming online a little bit more. But in that time, like in the last 7 years, there's been transformative change in how we do it. So I see the case that when we do get to construct data centers again locally within Ireland, they're going to look very different to the way that they look today. So that's where I see myself coming in, is trying to be on the cutting edge of technology and reduce their impact. So they're unavoidable as a piece of infrastructure, but you know, again, it's more of a European context than just a local one.
Okay, Angus, if I can come to you. We didn't hear a lot of optimism. I mean, like, there are some cautionary notes being sounded here. What does it make you feel? Do you feel concerned about the blockages, or are you feeling optimistic that everything can be pushed through?
I'm an eternal optimist, so I do feel optimistic. Yes, there are plenty of challenges, but if we get weighed down by the challenges, then we don't make any progress. So there are plenty of opportunities for progress. To go back to what I spoke about earlier, we've the government BIM mandate and various other opportunities ahead of us. But there are other countries that are years ahead of us, and we can learn from them. Let's say we're 15 years behind some of the Scandinavian countries in how they manage some of their asset information and throughout the full life cycle of projects and assets. It's not going to take us 15 years to catch up, because we have plenty of opportunities to learn from them, so we can be optimistic about that. And we have huge capabilities in Ireland, and many of opportunities to bring in capabilities internationally, as Ronnie spoke about earlier as well, to combine capabilities in IT, capabilities in various sectors with how we manage our built environment to deliver solutions using whether it be AI and machine learning and the likes. Combine that with domain expertise from consulting engineers and clients, and combined with the standards and the tools that are already out there, that people are already using to enable us to solve these very complex and seemingly insurmountable problems.
Pat, if I can come to you, do you get frustrated when your role is so based in green, and you see the delays that happen? And I mean, is it all happening fast enough when we have these infrastructure target, or the net emission targets for 2030 and 2050? Do we have any hope of meeting them?
Well, I think we just need to become a lot more joined up, because we make policies in complete silos. So we make a climate action plan, and we do a national development plan, and they don't talk to each other. So we haven't actually, government never actually quantified the carbon associated with the national development plan. That took us, funded by an international philanthropic fund, to do that. That should have been a priority for government, because they have to work out, how are you going to deliver the national development plan and meet climate? Nobody's even talking about this.
You're back to the fundamental tension we've mentioned in all the contributions.
Yes, I mean, and that needs to translate down into policy, into the climate, into the new Planning Act, which doesn't mention the use of materials or climate anywhere. Because if you build sprawl, you're using materials incredibly inefficiently. So that is a key part of the Planning Act, which doesn't mention it at all. And planners don't necessarily understand that connection, and we really need to educate them about it, that there is a connection between the amount of materials you use and the topologies and the types of dwellings that you deliver, and the type of infrastructure that you deliver.
One last question to Anne, and then we'll be wrapping up. And our public bodies, I mean, I know that the National Transport Authority is responsible for a thing that is a public good, and part of the battle to get people out of cars. But in general, do you think public bodies are moving fast enough, or do they get bogged down in red tape, slow decision making, the sort of things we heard in our first panel?
Well, I think...
And we won't tell a soul what to do.
Well, you know, we have the constraints of the planning system as well as every other body. And yes, you know, decision making is very centralized, you know, so we do go through the public spending code, and, you know, at a certain level, it's a government decision, you know, in terms of expenditure. And there's a lot of, I suppose, resource goes in to ensuring that we have everything in place in order to facilitate that decision making. So you would like, naturally, I would say, as a public body, you'd like some of those central decisions devolved a little bit more into the bodies themselves. But when you think about it, we are spending the government's money, the public money. We do have to ensure that we're getting the best value on behalf of the state and government. So I can see, you know, that's another tension there, but maybe it's around the level of spend that really needs the central decision making maybe could be devolved, you know, at a lower level or a higher level.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry I have to bring the panel to a close, as there were so many other questions we could have raised in relation to, you know, drilling into digitalisation and what have you, but we are out of time. I'd like to thank our guests, Pat Barry, John Fitzgerald, Angus O'Keefe, Chris Behan and Anne Graham. Now we're now going to pause for a moment while our next panel comes to the stage, but in the meantime, could I ask you to show your appreciation for our panel?